So I just wanted to share this problem-solving model methodology with you guys. I think it will help in doing your research for your PSA. And I'm going to get most of this information from chapter 18 of Technical Communication. It's a textbook that we use for our Technical Communication class, 210. A recommendation report is quite similar to a PSA. This is the problem-solving model, and it does a couple of things. But essentially, as you can see in this nice graphic here, we're starting with a problem, and then we're ending with providing a recommendation, just like our PSA. Now, this is done in a number of different ways, and it can be done for a number of different problems. It can be something very practical. For example, the problem of our printer being broken. Our printer is broken, right? And so that's what our problem is. We've identified that that's the problem. Establishing criteria for responding to the problem or opportunity, okay? We're going to focus on the problem part, not the opportunity part. And so here we'll say, well, the things that I need out of the solution are the printer needs to print in color. It needs to do duplex printing, and it needs to print fast. Again, another very practical problem. Let's say you want to get a new TV. Maybe it's not that your old one broke, but you just want a new one. And so the criteria might be, well, it needs to be at least 50 inches, but also there's a cost criteria, and because I'm not a millionaire, right? If there was no cost criteria, then I could spend as much money as I want. I could spend $1 million getting the best TV in the whole world, and then it would solve all of my problems, right? So yeah, so cost, maybe I can't spend more than $1,000. And so based off of the criteria, then you come up with options. One thing that's important to state here is that this is different from maybe what you did in SHSS 150 or WCS 150, where you thought of a problem. I'm not sure if you had a main topic for your class or not, but you thought, okay, gun control. All right, I'm going to argue in favor of gun control. Okay, now I need to look at all of the sources that exist in favor of gun control, right? And so that's what you did with 150, because you're learning how to write in an argument fashion. You were learning how to write argumentatively. And yes, you were learning how to do research a little bit, but the one problem with that type of research is that you're simply looking at information that backs up what you believe already. This method is a little bit more of a heuristic, is what we would call it, which means discovery based. It's a heuristic method in that we are finding a problem that exists in the world or here in Kazakhstan. Student stress might be a problem that we want to focus on, okay? And then we're going to be very open-minded as we think about what do we want out of a solution, and we start doing a lot of secondary research, figure out what do we want. And we stay open-minded as we figure out across the world, how are people solving this issue of student stress? And we might come up with criteria if we want. Now, this is optional for you guys, okay? So do you need to come up with criteria 100%? Not necessarily. Do you need 3 to 6 options? Not necessarily, but this is a good process to go through, and it will show that you're an ethical researcher. And what it will show is when you're using a methodology like this, is it establishes your credibility as a researcher, and it establishes the sequence of investigative steps so that people understand how you came to the solution that you came to. So if you follow a methodology like this, people tend to believe you more often, because you can be like, look, these are my methods right here. I followed this very clear methodological process. It wasn't just like, I like reading week. Reading week is really cool. I wish I had reading week. And so I'm just going to say that reading week is the solution to student stress. Because, like, let's think about it logically. Would reading week help with student stress? Probably. Yeah. I mean, it's a good solution. It's a good, thing to do, I think. Reading week can be effective, right? I'm guessing it'll help with student stress if done properly. And so a good researcher is going to be open-minded to figuring out what the solution is. You can definitely have a hypothesis or a research question or an idea of what your solution will be, but you should go into this being a little bit open-minded as you do a bunch of secondary research to figure out what the solution could be. Okay. Um, so yes, you can have a hypothesis, you can have kind of an idea of what you think it might be, but try to stay open-minded. Now, one thing you can do in connection to this, I'm going to upload this chapter of TechCom to our Moodle page where this video will be. Okay. But one thing you can do is you can create what's called a decision matrix. This is where you weigh the criteria and the options. Because remember, we have problem, we have criteria, we have options, and then final solution. Okay. Here we have our problem, which is if you read here that there's a printer that's broken, okay, or we need a new printer for this office. We have criteria listed here, pages per minute, duplex printing and color printing. We have our options. These are 3 specific printers, I'm guessing. It's probably not just the brand, but it's actually like this Sharp printer, this 1000 EF24 2012, right, or whatever, Xerox and Ricoh. And we are weighting each one. So this is also an option that you can do if you would like to. You can put a weight toward each criteria. Now, what this does is it makes one criteria worth a lot more than another criteria. For example, if I'm purchasing a house, cost criteria might be worth a lot more weight than architecture, right? I would love to have a new house with beautiful architecture, but more importantly is I can only spend a certain amount of money on my house. Again, otherwise, or I would just buy a mansion, right? And so here they've weighted color as the most important thing. So for whatever reason, their office here for this printer, they need a color printer. That's the most important thing. The second most important is duplex printing. And then the least important is how fast it prints. So it really doesn't have to be too fast. The rating score here seems to be out of 10. They don't tell us. I guess it's something that we just kind of assume. And so you can see here that color is rated 10 here and 9 here for pages per minute. That rating is very similar. It's only similar. It's only a difference of 1 point. But because of the way that it's weighted, they do the math here, and suddenly this right here is worth an extra 31 points, right? Instead of just an extra 1 point. And so color is quite important here. That being said, this one right here got a 10 for the middle one, which has a weight of 3 versus only a weight of 1, or weight of 1 of this one up here. So even though pages got 9, here this one still got the higher score, right? Let's look at one more example, if I'm not boring you guys to death yet. This is honestly, this is how you're going to get, if you don't have to do this model, but this is one, you do need to follow the problem solution advocacy model, but you don't necessarily have to create a decision matrix, and you don't necessarily have to follow the problem solving model from chapter 18 of technical communication. You definitely can. And in fact, you can cite chapter 18 of technical communication as a chapter in a textbook. Okay. I'll provide the citation information for you guys on that, or at least the title page of the textbook, so you guys can find that information yourselves. But this is just a helpful method of showing that you're being an ethical researcher. It's a bit of a pet peeve and just kind of poor rhetoric when I can see clearly that the student just wants their solution to be the best solution. And so I really expect to be able to see some good solutions being looked at, or one final solution. You don't have to mention all of the solutions that you come up with in your video, of course. It's up to you really on how you want to create that. You could go through your solutions and say, like, I looked at these different solutions and here's the final recommendation. So yeah, here's just another example. It's a little bit different. So this one is on purchasing a house. They have 3 houses that they're looking at here. Now, instead of a weight and like the timesing, they just have the max. It equals 100 total, and just each one has a different max. So size, architecture, and interior are only worth 10 each, whereas location and cost are worth the most, likely because they want to make sure that it's in a place where that they can commute to work to, right? Or that there's like a good school, maybe, things like that, right? And cost is because they're on a budget, they can only spend a certain amount. Here we have this one that just weights to, it has a weight of either 1 or 2, and everything is weighted 1 except for price is weighted 2. The total, strangely, is 70, and it looks like each one can get a score of up to 10, I'm guessing. That seems to be the common one, just because there's a 9 here. I'm guessing that you can go to 10. So these are different options, okay? All right, let's jump back to this chapter. So feel free to look through this chapter and get some ideas on how you're going to go through this process, how you're going to go through this research method. And then just remember that at the end, you will offer some kind of solution. You will have some kind of advocacy that you're recommending to your viewers. But what I need to stress right now is secondary research, secondary research, secondary research, secondary research. This is something that students really struggle with. In fact, students in person, when we're having normal in-person classes, even when we're not doing the whole difficulty of pandemic and online learning, students really struggle to sit down and read. Partly because, well, for a couple of reasons. One, it's kind of boring, right? To sit down and just read hundreds of pages in scholarly and non-scholarly articles on student stress or online learning methods, or renewable energy resource options in Kazakhstan, whatever it is, flooding on NU street or Kazakhstan streets or Nur-Sultan streets, right? Whatever your problem that you're focusing on, it's kind of boring to read about it. And so what I'm going to recommend to you guys is to come up with a game plan right now. Figure out right now how many scholarly articles you're going to read a week, how many non-scholarly articles you're going to read a week, how many videos are you going to watch a week, both about the problem and about the solutions that are being facilitated and used across the world around this problem. Okay, so make sure you come up with some kind of game plan. The other thing that is tricky with secondary research is you can't procrastinate it very, very long. You can procrastinate it a little bit, but if you procrastinate it too much, then you just can't do it, because you can't read hundreds of pages in an entire weekend, understand the information, understand it critically to create an argument, then shoot a whole video about that argument. You can't procrastinate it. And so that's part of the reason why we have this method of turning in a draft, getting feedback on your draft, revising your draft for the final, is to hopefully get you guys from procrastinating and waiting to the last minute to try to do the entire research report. Okay. Remember that it does need to be based off of research. You need to be doing a lot of secondary research. You're going to kind of become a little bit mini scholars on whatever topic you choose. Okay. Now, if you want to do some primary research, you want to do some surveying, you want to do some interviewing, maybe of certain scholars or faculty, let me know. I think for the most part, we're going to stick to secondary research, just because with primary research, there's a whole lot of things we have to teach you about ethics and about, ethical research practices. But if you do have an idea for like a survey that you want to send out on like Google Forms or SurveyMonkey that might help with your research, that is qualitative research, that you won't be asking anyone specific details and it will be anonymous and ethical, and they have to go through informed consent and all of that, and maybe you have some experience in that already, you can email me and we can talk about that. But I think for the most part, it'll be best just to stick to secondary research at this point. Okay, so just make sure that you are doing enough reading, that you are spending time going through this process. For me personally, a lot of my writing process is the reading and brainstorming and thinking. And that's when the ideas start coming. And then I'm able to actually produce an effective argument, whether in text or in video, but only after I've spent that time doing a lot of reading and a lot of thinking about this problem and possible solutions and looking at it in a more logical way and not just in the way of like, what solutions do I like, right? Which is why a decision matrix could be so effective. And you can show this decision matrix in the video you make if you wanted to, okay? Um, you could also create this decision matrix just on your own on the side just to look at it as a reference for the video, but you might not actually include the decision matrix itself if you don't find like a natural way. Because if you do include it in the video, you will definitely want to find like a natural way to include something like methodology stuff in your video, but it could definitely show, um, it could help show you as an ethical researcher if done well. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys.